podcast. I'm your co-host, Emma Jackson.
And I was Jose.
And we are back again with Chris Howard of Softeq. Thank you for joining us.
Sure.
Again.
If you haven't seen part 1, you need to go check it out. Chris talks about his entrepreneurial journey, and he gives some golden advice. If you're just tuning in, Chris is a lifelong entrepreneur and investor, and he's become a prominent mentor in the startup world. So we are definitely going to be asking some great questions today about mentorship, and I know that you are really focused on mentoring startups, and now you recently started a venture capital firm as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, we had, so Softeq has been around for 27 years now,
Mm-hmm.
and we call it a full stack. Full stack means a lot of different things to different people, but for us, what it means to me is that we do hardware, firmware, mobile, web backend, AI, ML, and data analytics all under one roof. Right?
Wow.
So IoT, connected devices, med tech, pet tech.
Actually full stack.
Yeah, actually, that's the full stack, and a lot of it is for the Fortune 500. So we're doing product development, getting applications, built and shipped, and we had a lot of startups coming to us with great ideas, but they, if they didn't have any funding, we had to turn them away. Like, we really like that, but go get some money, come back, and we'll build it for you. Sometimes I do an angel investment, right? And then we do a product for them. And so in one particular case, I put $250K into a pet tech startup. And they're at a $15 million valuation. They sell a $1,000 dog collar. It's called Halo Collar. $1,000 dog
Yeah.
collar with a monthly subscription.
No, but I know exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep.
So fast forward 4 years, they closed a Series B at $400 million valuation, and we continue to be their technical team, right? So we thought, well, let's start a venture fund and formalize this process, but not just give them money, but give them mentorship. So let's start a studio program where we put them through a 4-month program, 1 week per month in Houston, where we can actually give back, mentor, and coach these teams, and then pair them with our 400 engineers worldwide to help them get their POCs built or their MVPs built, or get their hardware or software more enterprise ready, like we do for the Fortune 500. And so we started that a couple years ago, and we've put 64 startups through in the last 18 months, and so far so good.
That is so
I'm kind of
exciting.
curious. In the last episode, you stated that when you started this journey of entrepreneur, there weren't a lot of mentors.
Yeah.
Did that influence you on making this program?
Yeah, I mean, for a long time, I saw a gap here in Houston. There wasn't really anything available for founders like myself, and that started to change with the launch of like Station Houston, with the Canon and the Ion. So last 5 years has been a tremendous amount of progress in that area, but still, I saw a gap in, like, no one's actually trying to help founders get things built. Right, and that's true even at other accelerator programs like a Techstars or a 500 Global, and or a YC or Y Combinator, right? And so that was our differentiator, is not just money, but extending my full stack per se, where we're providing money plus mentorship plus services all under one roof. So I look at the services business now as a product development or even a startup development engine, because we bolt on to a startup development team, and we have our solution engineers, we have our business analysts, we have a team of people. You need a QA guy for a month, you need a business analyst for a couple of weeks. Rather than as a startup trying to find that person, bring them in, hire them, give them stock, hope that they work, or cobble together a team that's never shipped a product before. Why not use a company like Softeq that's built products for the Fortune 500 and actually delivered them, and help you get that product market fit? And then once you get that traction and get that series or seed or a Series A investment, you can start internalizing that if you want, right? And build your product team at that point. But there's no reason to do all that from the start.
I love that. Do you focus on entrepreneurs and startups in Houston, or are you open to, nationwide or globally?
Well, the interesting thing is I thought that it was going to be fairly heavily Houston or Texas focused. I mean, if you look at the Texas triangle between Dallas, Houston, Austin, and San Antonio, there's a lot going on, right? And so it's true that we've had, there's probably maybe half of them are located here in Houston, but then the other half are coming from the coasts, right? So we're getting them West Coast, East Coast, nationwide, Canada. And this is also good for Houston because we're attracting startups here,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then they come and see, oh, this is what Houston's like. They're not just all riding horses and shooting off six shooters and things like that. So, and they actually uh, see what's going on here, and they get to know and love the city, right? And but it's also been, interestingly enough, worldwide. We've had startups come in from Bahrain, from Israel, from Kenya,
Wow.
from the UK, and since partly because of COVID, we took this kind of in-person and virtual model,
Mm-hmm.
and partly because the commitment is you only have to be in town for 1 week and then you go back to your family. Most people can't spend 90 days, away from their friends and family, and so the model has really worked from that
Let
standpoint.
me ask you this question. Do you think mentorship is key to the success of a business?
I do think so. I mean, maybe I succeeded despite not having like a huge mentor network. But I mean, I think that if I had to do it over again, I would have absolutely reached out more to what's available now. I mean, if you look at the internet, even, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you can take classes from the dean of the Stanford machine learning department for free, right? And so you don't have to have, hundreds of thousands of dollars to get a Stanford degree. And so the information is there, right, to get and to know. And it's starting to coalesce around places. So, having workspaces and shared workspaces at places like the Ion or the Cannon or, other places, Esperson Building is becoming pretty popular around here in Houston, and getting that, additional mentorship and advice. I mean, I think that's what's really helped Silicon Valley grow to the extent that it has, because there's so much experience there, and you cobble together a team with experience, and then you've got venture capitalists and investors with experience, and if you don't have that, in one place, then it's a lot harder.
No, I first got exposed to this sort of world. My first job out of university was in New York City. I was working for a nonprofit, and I was going to coming from like the policy, nonprofit, international relations world. But what was cool was this organization was essentially like a VC firm for social on enterprises. So, but on a micro level, and it was much more about the mentorship. So I just think it is so cool that you're able to provide that support, because that's the one piece we missed. But what we did was we held pitch competitions at these big global youth conferences, and we would find these amazing businesses or these entrepreneurs who wanted to start things to give back to their communities, and we would provide them with these, with the funding, but also access to the mentorship network. And that was what really opened doors for them, because we, partners like Dahlberg and Impact Hub and all these global partners that could then provide them access to the other pieces they needed to grow their business. And my job was just fellow relations. So I was checking in with them. I was seeing how things were going, if they were able to access the resources. And the most prominent thing I saw, because I was like, geez, these are some of these smartest kids. And I say kids, but they were older than me at the time, because I was the youngest person in my office, and I did not let anyone know that, because I think I was like 22. And I remember going to a conference in Madrid, and because globally the college age, university age is so different. You could have people in graduate school. So we had pitch competitions, and I'm sitting there watching like a 27-year-old pitch. I'm like, yes, I am the adult in the room, But I realized that it was access to resources and proper mentorship that is really the only thing holding back some of the most brilliant people and then brilliant businesses from happening. So I think that Softeq fills such an interesting role, because you also have that full stack development, which right now, I mean, that is the biggest barrier to entry, is that someone will have an amazing idea, and then they're cobbling together the resources to build a really, low level MVP. And it's just, you can set them ahead. It's just such a smart investment model.
Well, it seems to be working. I mean, I think it de-risks the startup because of the
Mm-hmm.
experience that we bring, and it de-risks the investment for the investors as well. Because
Mhm.
if you think of technology, it looks like magic to most people, right? And so it allows us to get under the hood for 4 months and work with the founding team and understand who they are.
Mm-hmm.
It also gets us under the hood of their technology and understand what they really have, what have they built, and then also be able to mentor them on you know what else they need to do there. Because there's a lot of founders now. It used to be that 9 out of 10 startups had a technical co-founder, and now it's getting to where 9 out of 10 don't.
Mm-hmm.
And partly that's because they all grew up with the technology. They've been growing up with mobile phones. They have ideas for apps and products, and they know how those products work, but they don't necessarily know how to build them.
Mm-hmm.
And so what it allows us to do is get underneath there and say, well, do you know whether you actually own your source code? How are you doing your source code tracking? Who has access to that? Is it one guy, right? What happens if he gets disgruntled, right? Now all of a sudden you don't have and he doesn't believe in the keep your own hands clean policy, right? And so, do they know what source code is? Do they know what firmware is? Do they know how to ship a product? Do they know how to get it manufactured, right? And then also partnering with and pairing with the network of like our Fortune 500, because we had startups come in working with like the Epson VR headset. Well, guess what? We've been building apps for Epson on their VR headset for years. And so we can put them in touch with that team, for example, and
That's pretty
get their
cool.
feedback and even make Epson aware of like, oh, well, here's an opportunity that you didn't think of this application. It's something to help doctors with, augmented, surgeries and, for implants, right? And yeah, I mean, I think that definitely if you're a startup founder now, there's such opportunity for mentorship out there. You just have to be open for it and seek it out.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were speaking right now. You said something that kind of hit me, and the question I have right now is like, what does good mentorship look like?
Hmm.
Because you said it has to go through like a process. You can get underneath the hood. You can see what they have and what they're lacking. So, what does a good mentorship actually honestly look like?
Yeah. Well, I'd say in an ideal case, the mentorship, of course, it has to come from a point of experience, right? So keep that in mind with a particular mentor. What is their area of expertise, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so if they go outside of that, it's fine, but you might like also, kind of weight the advice differently depending. But also just it's a coaching style, right? You want to provide the information and give the founder the opportunity to make the decisions and make the mistakes, or go in directions that they feel is that they feel that they need to make, and in also in an ideal case, let hopefully them come up with the answers. Just telling them, do this, do that, do this. Right? You're coaching them. Have you thought of this? Have you thought of that? What about this? What about that? Are you aware of this other company? What is this business model? Things like that nature. So I think mentorship is a very a coaching style in a collaborative manner.
I like that.
Do you
Mhm.
tend to at this stage now, do you tend to have any personal mentorship, or how does like when you mentor startups, is it primarily through your VC, or how does that work?
Yeah. Well, it's all. I mean, we tend to all kind of work and touch different all three parts of the business, from the Softeq Venture Fund, Softeq Studio, and Softeq Services, Softeq Development Corp. But I do get involved because I do want to. I see it as a way for me to give back on the community.
Mm-hmm.
What I figured out was, at some point in time, why did I build this services business? I didn't really wake up one day like a lot of founders do with this great idea, and I think the world needs another service business, right? And so I did feel that my differentiator at the time was what I called technical software development, which meant the harder, more innovative products. I used to tell people, don't hire Softeq to do your website. And that was back in the HTML days when people called themselves HTML developers. But the web has gotten much more complicated on the back end. So we do, of course, have web development team.
Telling me
Um,
the truth. I had one of my developers. He was giving an explanation. I was like, Vlad, you're so high level right now. Like, I need you to bring a Barney style for me.
And that's why we keep it front end versus back end,
Front
right?
end,
Because
back
there's
end, yeah.
so much. Now a website is actually what you would build a whole solution. It's just that's the back end, you
Good.
know?
I
Well,
mean,
because you have a mobile app that also isn't just a mobile app. It might need to communicate with a piece of hardware, a medical device,
Mm-hmm.
a pet dog, a dog collar, and then you need the back end to also manage all of that. And
it
so
just
it does become much more complicated. But I do get involved directly. I see it as community service and collaborating and giving back, and kind of leans into my passion for entrepreneurship more so than just strictly product development. And everyone on the team gets excited about that because
Mm-hmm.
they've been involved and been in business people for many years, and so they all have passion for building startups.
And with that, what are the challenges that you will see the most when you
Mm-hmm.
are, especially working with younger entrepreneurs? What do
Mm-hmm.
you feel like you encounter the same things?
Well, when we're bringing them and evaluating, we try to pick like the top 3% of applicants that are coming to us, right? And so, a lot of investors. I have a friend, VC, Ben Narrison. He's got his own venture fund, but he says what he looks for are 5 things in a startup, right? And I love this, so I'm stealing it. But it's founder, 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 great idea in a big market, right? And so that's what he looks for. And so you are looking at the founding team specifically. Are they coachable? A lot of people aren't. And you can get a feel for that pretty early on in the conversation, and
Mm-hmm.
because when you're in the interview process and you're talking to them, um, you're also trying to give them some advice and trying to see if they actually take it or not, or just reject it out of hand. Are they listening? Are they coachable? Because you're going to need that. You're going to need someone that is going to listen and from the mentorship, and so that they could succeed.
This is so. I've had a lot of conversation in the past week with Jose about perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and that I just over the past 5 years, I feel like I'm finally at a place where I can have the tiniest little bit of perspective, and it has changed everything because I don't think I would have been very coachable at 22. I
Yeah.
I
actually
can concur there.
he didn't even know. And I feel like I am just now getting to a place where and it's, hearing this, it's just so interesting because I think about my younger self full of ideas and energy, but I was like, I know this is the right way. This is what we're doing. Da 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 da. And there's just, I think sometimes you just have to go through life and you have to learn that actually there's a reason that people who've been around for a few decades longer than you have some advice to share.
Mhm.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing because the people that are driven and achievers and overachievers tend to be opinionated, and you need a balance, right? Certainly,
Mm-hmm.
you need to understand when you should be opinionated.
Mm-hmm.
Like what did Ford say?
I mean, he has
Henry
a
Ford.
Henry got a lot of great
What did
quotes.
Henry Ford say? He said, if he had asked the public what they needed, they would have said faster horses,
Yes,
right?
I
So you had to
love
be
that.
opinionated about that. Um, I'd say one other thing that we run into for product development founders, whether it's software or hardware, is that they set out trying to build version 3.0 of the product, right? And so with all of the
Mm.
features, and they keep grinding on it and trying to build something that they think is going to be great, and then they don't ship and they don't ship and they don't ship, and then they finally ship and it's not right. And you really want to build version 1.0, or what they call that MVP, the minimal viable product. What is it? And you really want to limit the number of features there to a particular client, and you want to make a client or some small set of clients extremely happy with your product, because
And
then
then you
you
can
can
add as you
build and
go.
add and expand and things like that. And so I see a lot of founders make that mistake where they just spend too long building that version 3 and then thinking that they know the client.
We have that. We actually have people come to us. It's interesting as a marketing agency because we get
Mm-hmm.
to dive into all different kinds of businesses. And I'm like still very passionate about working with startups. And something that is interesting with that is they are so certain this is my market. Even more established businesses who found some success but are looking to branch off and expand and grow, so solid. This is our market. This is what it is. We know all of this. And then we'll run A/B testing and we'll like, have you considered this demographic? And they will have never considered a specific demographic or an audience or an outreach because their data shows XYZ. And we talk about in our work, we isolate the variables and we only change one thing at a time. And so when you're starting out with your MVP, but it's actually a much more, advanced version, you often don't know what it is that is not resonating. Or if something is working, what is it that's working? And you
And you
can make
need
the wrong assumption.
Exactly. And you need to be open to that and understand when you want to pivot into it, right?
Mm.
And so many products and companies have started out that way. Slack was an example, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there was a video game company that built a tool and they ended up pivoting into that tool. A recent one that I really like is those Stanley Cups. Have you seen this?
Yes.
Yes.
So, and kudos to the CEO where they built these really heavy construction cups for big tough guys, on the job, right?
Now all the 12-year-olds have them.
Yeah, the 12-year-olds and the female demographic. So what
Mm-hmm.
happened was it went viral. Some woman got on TikTok or something like that talking about how much she loves her Stanley Cup.
Yep.
And all of a sudden it went viral and they started selling these cups. And the CEO was like, let's lean into that and create like baby blue versions of the cup
And
and
baby
pinks and
pink and
whatever
patterns.
and stuff like that. And all of a sudden, even though they'd been around for many years, their sales went up like 5x. I mean, it actually went up from, I forgot what the numbers were, but we're talking like it went up from 100 million to 500 million, something like that.
That's a
and
massive
that
jump.
their biggest demographic now is the
It's like
women,
completely
not the
different.
construction guy, because that market was a smaller piece. And so you have to be open to hearing that and saying, well, actually, maybe aren't. Can you imagine, like, we built the construction company mug, and like maybe women is the thing we should do. So it's interesting.
I think my last question I have to you is like, what's the best advice you've probably given somebody?
Well, I think one of the best pieces of advice that I've given founders is, and a lot of people talk about it this way, but it's the roller coaster journey of entrepreneurship, right? And so there's going to be highs, there's going to be lows, and what I always tell people and on my team is you really have to put your arms up and enjoy the ride, whether it's going up or it's going down, right? And a lot of times when it feels like you're on the way down, when you look back, you think, oh, well, that was one of the best things that ever happened to me. And that's happened to me time and time again, where it felt like, oh, I just lost a customer that was 85% of my business. Well, that feels pretty bad, right? And also pretty scary, right? And so you just have to, again, problem solve through that. And when I look back, well, actually, that was the best thing that happened because it removed my golden handcuffs in that scenario. And I had, 6 months later, I had 3 clients instead of 1, and I was growing as fast as I could, right? And an example of that would be Blockbuster, for example. When Netflix approached Blockbuster about being their digital streaming service, right? And Blockbuster laughed them out of the room when they asked for $50 million, right? And so fast forward, Blockbuster's down to 1 store from 20,000, and Netflix is the top dog. So enjoy the journey. If you're into Stoicism, a variation of that is amor fati, which is enjoy your fate. No matter what's happening, enjoy the ride. And so I would say you really have to have that type of mindset if you're going to step into entrepreneurship.
Definitely. I see a lot of people talk about that roller coaster effect. And I think Alex, I forget his last name right now. He's a social media entrepreneur, and he pretty
Alex
much
Hormozy.
yeah. Thank you. He states that throughout this journey, this roller coaster effect, the path gets narrower and narrower, and it gets harder and harder. But by the end, there's less competition because less people actually travel it, and you can look back and you say, "Man, I'm one of the few people in this world, in this planet, that I'm willing to take this many hits, go through this journey, and just take a moment and just acknowledge what you have accomplished."
Yeah, it's interesting. I think Jensen's getting a lot of play right now. He's the CEO of NVIDIA. One of his quotes is that if he knew how hard it was going to be to build this business, he wouldn't have done it.
There's a lot to be said for naivete to an
right?
extent,
Yeah.
And just part of why that is exactly why this podcast is called The Journey, is because rather than getting that success story of, the how I built this world, which is, hey, we sold our business, this is great, let's look back. We really love talking to people who are in the thick of it. What are they doing right now? What are they struggling with? What have they learned? Because it feels like that is the hardest part. And it's not so much, you meet entrepreneurs or business owners that are successful, and it's not that they had the best idea right out of the gate. They cornered the market. Most of the time it was that they were consistent and persistent.
Yeah.
So
I had a conversation with Emma yesterday. I was like, I feel like every year, I'm about to be 33 this year. Every single year, every single venture I am involved with or participating in, it feels like it's such much harder to make the same decision I did when I was younger, or to be like the same, not even energy levels, just like consistency. It's just it gets more difficult because now I'm making decisions that not just affect my livelihood, but affects multiple people's livelihood. So like they're weighted differently.
And you're also, I think, way more aware of the consequences of each decision that you make. And we've talked a lot about that. You move, it's a chessboard. And, you're doing that in the beginning, but you have no idea. Whereas, later on down the line, and it can be, if you're not careful, if you don't lean into the journey, it can end up being paralyzing. So I honestly really rock solid advice. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing your wisdom. And if you guys like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. We have some really great guests coming up, and you should be following along and hearing about our journey.
Thanks for having me on.
Thanks.